It's the only place probably in Europe where you can walk around and look at all the different phases of a building from its start of its construction to what it became, 5 centuries later. You can see where they've knocked bits down and added bits on. It's absolutely incredible. You can't do that anywhere else.
You've got 3 enormous stone buildings built one on top of the other. You have the Roman fortress headquarters, which is abandoned at some point in the early 5th century. You've got the Norman cathedral, some of which you can still see, which was constructed in the late 11th century. And then you have the current building, which was constructed from about 1220 onwards.
In the 1960s, it was discovered that the cathedral central tower was moving, and it was feared that the whole structure, 12,000 tons of it, would soon collapse. A public appeal was launched to put in new foundations, and this brought about the big excavations underneath the cathedral. And these became far more extensive than was originally envisaged at the time. They thought they would be discovering the original Saxon cathedral, but this proved simply not to be the case. But what was revealed was the outlines and some of the walls and the painted decoration of a massive Romanesque aisleless cathedral building. Initially there was just one archaeologist for the first year, Herman Ram. But after that, Derek Phillips took over and he conducted all the subsequent excavations, and were able then to inform the whole process of saving the cathedral by giving detailed information on the foundations to the engineers. The 2 excavations that we've done in connection with the York Minster Reveal project are so important because they have been done under modern controlled conditions without that need to rush, getting our actual hands on the same archaeology as Derek Phillips, and it gives us an insight into looking back into his archive and understanding much better what he found at the time.
So we're stood on the newly inserted glass floor, which is covered over the Roman structural remains in this area, and you can see part of the basilica building, part of the fortress headquarters itself. It's been heavily modified to create a footing for one of the columns that would have held the roof up at one point. This return wall is part of the courtyard that was formed in front of the Basilica Hall. So I've crawled around under there and drawn all of the stonework to create a record of it, and it's now here visible through the floor for us to see. We're standing in the treasury. We're actually in the site of the first archaeological excavation undertaken in the cathedral in 1829, after the Great Fire that consumed the East End. Antiquarian John Brown excavated this space. When they reinstated the floor, the archways that you see here were built to carry the floor. The excavations in the 60s and 70s took this space and went a lot deeper and uncovered the rear wall of the Roman fortress headquarters, which you can now see through the floor. Beyond that wall was the Roman road, the Via Quintana, that ran along the back of the basilica. And for me, a personal milestone, the first Roman road I've ever had a chance to excavate. Because it's positioned directly behind the fortress headquarters, and in fact directly in front of a doorway through that building, there's every likelihood that the people who walked on that surface were the commanders and senior officials from the Roman fortress. Because there's always a possibility, of course, that the emperor himself may have walked across that surface. You're in touch with Constantine and possibly in touch with Septimus Severus some 100 years before then, scraping away where the great have walked.